For me, joining the military was really an escape from my problems. I grew up with a very abusive mother, and I just felt like I had to get out. And getting to be part of something so much bigger than myself, getting to have this purpose greater than any purpose in the world, inspired me in a way that I didn't know existed. I found myself on the Air Force Academy, and it was a time where everything just came back. I was hit with anxiety, depression, almost like it came out of nowhere. When my enlistment was up in 2003, I decided to get out and stay home with my children at the time. And having all that time to sit at home alone with my kids all day really started stirring up things in me that I hadn't dealt with from my past. It got to the point where I didn't want to be alive anymore, and that was really scary for me because I have so much to live for. Why don't I want to be here anymore? Why don't I care? And when I didn't know where to turn, I found myself in a serendipitous moment where I was invited by the manager of the Air Force Academy stables to adopt a baby wild Mustang. So he took me to a rescue in Falcon, Colorado, where there were just a whole herd of these baby Mustangs. And when I stepped through the gate, they all ran except for this one horse. She just stared at me. And when I turned to walk back in the barn, she followed. And I knew in that moment that my life would be changed forever. And I named her Shelby. It was a couple days later that Shelby was dropped off to the farm in the Air Force Academy, and we got to work right away. I was very blessed at the time to be working with some of the greatest horsemen in the country, and they started teaching me how to speak the language of the horse. And what that meant is that everything I communicated, I had to do nonverbal. That also meant that I had to gain control over my emotions when I was in the presence of this horse. If I'm an emotional train wreck, they're not gonna look at me, they're not gonna trust me, they're not even gonna wanna be around me. So in that process of gaining trust from this baby horse, I was able to start trusting myself. In turn, others started trusting me more. The way that I communicated in my relationships with my children and my friends and just my entire environment started to shift because I started to become in control of my emotions. And while I was in college, I wrote a business plan to own a horse farm. That had always been my dream. And got an A on the paper, stuck the business plan away in my drawer. He started telling me about equine-assisted psychotherapy. And it was something I had never heard of before, but he was explaining how it's not for people who are necessarily handicapped, but have emotional problems, mental health problems, depression, anxiety. And as he was explaining to me how horses can help people emotionally, it was like putting the pieces of a puzzle together. I fully understood how my horse Shelby had helped me overcome all of my emotional issues. And I decided in that moment that this was my purpose, that I could help other people gain all the benefits that I had gotten from my Mustang. So I went right away and I took my first set of certifications so that I could practice as an equine psychotherapy practitioner. We launched the program in 2009 and officially became a certified 501c3 in 2011. And right when I thought everything was coming together, 2 days after Christmas, my dad passed away of a heart attack unexpectedly. My mom had called me. I had run to the store and my mom had called and said, "Hey, your dad's passed out in the barn. The ambulance is on its way." And I heard his voice, but it wasn't in my ears. It was with my heart. And I heard the words, "This isn't about you or me. It's about part of a bigger plan. And I can help you more on the other side." I feel like it was that piece that allowed me to move on with the grace that I did, and to know somehow, I didn't know how it was going to be okay, but at the end of the day, that piece let me know that it would be. I realized that it wasn't going to be practical to work with people one-on-one anymore. As a single mom, a full-time student, and working a full-time job, I thought if I'm going to help people, it's going to have to be in a group setting. What I didn't realize at the time is that was the biggest blessing in disguise. I decided I was going to take all 6 exercises, put them in one 8-hour day, and run it like a workshop. I only had 3 veterans show up for the very first session, and what came out of that day was so mind-blowing I watched people heal deep-seated trauma and wounds that they had carried for 10 years in one day. And in that moment, I knew I had something so special that it would change the world. I've learned that when you pray, you should be very specific, and I asked for 30 acres on Oak Openings, which is our local metro park, and to have a natural water source running through it. 2 weeks after I said my prayer, I received a call from Debbie Disbrow, who owns the farm that we're at now, and she said, "Hey, God put it on my heart to call you because I'm gonna sell my farm, and I want to offer it to you before I list it." While I was overcome with excitement, I also knew that we didn't have a budget to be able to afford this farm. But it was something that I just couldn't walk away from. It was everything I had prayed for. Why was this happening to me now when I didn't have the budget to pay for it? So I decided that I was going to offer her a land contract. I really thought in my mind, people don't do land contracts anymore, especially not on a beautiful facility like this place is. But I thought, well, I can send her the proposal, she can tell me no, and I can at least move on with my life. So I sat down, I typed up a proposal, I sent it over email, and 2 days later, she said yes. It was just in time to have our final retreat for the year at the new place. And I was able to rent some furniture from Rent-A-Center. We threw it all together, and it was by far the most magical retreat we had ever held. The difference here in this house is that nobody's going back to a separate room or a separate cabin, and the extra hours of interaction and camaraderie and bonding and relationships that were formed in this house literally just brought me to tears. I could not believe how special it was to have this retreat center and have a space where people can stay connected for the entire weekend. It was really a game changer for us. One of the biggest visions I have for this space is making it a part of the community. The H.O.O.V.E.S program has experienced a remarkable amount of growth over the past 5 years, and we want to keep growing so that we can help more people. Hello, my name is Amanda Held, and I'm the founder and executive director of H.O.O.V.E.S. And H.O.O.V.E.S stands for Healing of Our Veterans Equine Services. And we are an organization that is dedicated to helping veterans heal through the power of rescued horses. And we do that at our sanctuary and retreat center in Northwest Ohio in Swanton. And we provide a 5-day healing intensive for veterans to come to the farm and go through a process that has different layers to it so that they can really go from just being physically home to being fully home in their mind, body, and spirit. What led me to founding H.O.O.V.E.S is actually my own personal struggle with transitioning out of the military and PTSD. I found myself after my active duty military service in a really dark place. And I was actually hospitalized for an unsuccessful suicide attempt. And when that happened, I went into a bunch of clinical treatment. And I was actually told that I was treatment resistant. So what that meant was that no medication or psychotherapy that I was provided was working or effective for me. And I think the doctors just ended up with their hands tied saying, we don't know what else we can do for you. And that was a really challenging time for me, but it was also a pivotal moment in my life because what that meant was that if I was going to heal, that I actually really had to take responsibility for my own healing. And so I did, and I started to look into some holistic services. And even though I had a lifetime with horses and I was actually running a boarding and training facility at the time, I didn't understand the healing power of horses aside from being involved in horsemanship. And I actually met a gentleman a short time after I got out of the hospital who was involved in equine assisted psychotherapy and learning. And as he began to talk to me about how the horses helped from a reflective standpoint and from the ground, I started to kind of put some pieces together about the actual power that horses had. And I reached a pivotal moment where I knew that this journey was definitely my life purpose. And so I was doing all of these holistic things to heal myself and find healing. And then I added the training for the horse piece. And I think putting all of those things together it feels like magic. It's actually science and neuroscience, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But it actually gave me the breakthrough that I was originally looking for. And I'm really happy to report that I actually have fully healed from PTSD and some of the other mental health diagnosis. So I'm 15 years symptom free of any mental health challenges. And I really had to do this work on myself first. It was critical to do that work on myself. But once I got to a really good place and a sustainable level of what I would call my healing, I really wanted to give that to other people who had also been diagnosed as treatment resistant. Because I don't really believe that anybody is treatment resistant. I just believe that different things work for different people. And I think we have progressed a lot in the mental health arena, since I was told that about 15 years ago. Which is great. I think things are getting really progressive, and I think that neuroscience has done a lot for us in actually bringing hope to people that anyone can heal.
I think a lot of us aren't really sure and don't really understand some of the holistic pieces that can really help us in our mental health. So if you'd be open to sharing that, I'd love to hear that.
Everything that I had learned and that had assisted me in my healing journey, I actually took all of those things, and that's what I used to develop the process that the veterans go through at H.O.O.V.E.S. And so in the 5-day process, the participants will arrive on a Tuesday night, and we really just give people time to decompress, get to know each other. I think what's great, this is a post-traumatic growth program, and so it's really a focus forward program. We're not a clinical program. We do holistic work, and we love to be in partnership with clinical services. I feel like what we do in the clinical side of things are very complementary. A lot of times, therapists or psychologists or psychotherapists will get stuck with a client and they'll send them here. And we do this kind of breakthrough process, and then they can go back into their treatment and they can actually progress further. So we love to partner with the clinical side, and we just take a little bit of a different approach. And this is where we implement the curriculum that I've developed. And the curriculum is it's behavior-based and it's neuroscience-based. I've developed it from a myriad of trainings that I've done over the past decade, and I feel like I'm always adding to it or evolving it. But I did create the curriculum, and there are a lot of mindset and perspective exercises. And we also teach about the laws of nature. And I think that's a unique component, learning about the laws of nature, like the natural law of balance, the law of polarity, the law of correspondence, the law of rhythm. These are great laws for people to look up. And you can there's tons of videos on YouTube about the laws of nature. But I think sometimes we forget that we are also a part of nature, and nature has a way of being, and we can really get pulled outside of that way. And that's when we start to struggle and experience a lot of mental health challenges, because we're living in an unrealistic setting to how we've been created biologically. And so our signature course is called Discovering Your Human Blueprint. And we actually have this course on our website at H.O.O.V.E.S, and anybody can go and download the online course. But for the veterans specifically, and I'm sure this is true of anyone in life, but you're not who you were before you joined the military. You're also not who you were while you were in the military. And if you don't know who you are, everybody around you will be happy to tell you who you are. And when you start living in a way that everybody else wants you to be, you get further and further away from your authenticity. And I've never met anybody that was living out of their authenticity that didn't have mental health challenges, including myself. And I've, since doing this work for the past 10 years, realized that a lot of people, their biggest challenge is that they aren't living a life that's congruent with who they are intrinsically. And when they do that, when we help them discover through a series of questions what things are most meaningful to them, they kind of get like a roadmap of how to move forward and navigate life. It becomes almost mathematical. If you're doing more things in a day that are depleting your authenticity, you're going to have depression, anxiety, mental health challenges. If you're doing more things in a day that are fueling authenticity, you're going to have vibrance, you're going to have energy, you're going to have longevity. So we really teach people how to manage their perspective and a portion of their mental health based on their actions that they're taking every day. But we can't even begin to manage those things until we know who we are. And so that's a big piece of this work, and why I believe it's so effective is that we help people get into that core authenticity that they possess, where they're not comparing themselves, where they're not trying to be somebody else. And it really just puts people in their bodies, right? When we experience trauma or when we're living in an environment that's incongruent with who we are, our nervous system responds to that with symptoms like anxiety, with symptoms like depression. And so, it's different for everybody, but a lot of these core symptoms really can be cleaned up just by helping people learn to be okay with who they are. And not just be okay with who they are, but be empowered and appreciate who they are. So that's what our book work is focused on doing over the 5 days. The biggest thing that horses, and I think any animal, but especially horses, will do for us is help us further affirm if we are being authentic or not. So there's a lot of different theories on how horses respond to and interact with humans, and I'm just going to give you my theory from a lot of things that I've studied and then also things that I've observed personally. But what I've noticed or observed is that horses live in what we call full expression. So they don't cover up how they feel ever. They express how they feel, but what's amazing is they don't hold on to how they feel. They express it, they release it, they let it go, and they just move forward. They live in the present moment. And humans, we tend to do the opposite of that. And so what's amazing is horses are going to first respond to the level of authenticity that you're showing up with in your life. So if you have a heavy mask, the horses are probably not going to want to come near you. If you're very authentic, you almost become magnetic, and the horses will typically not get away from you. So it's really amazing to see the process that people go through, because the moment they step into their authenticity, the horses will shift and they will affirm that. It's instantaneous. And I think it really gives this work a lot of credibility, because initially when I tell people what the horses are going to do for them, they're kind of like, oh yeah, okay, well, they're animals and they, their brain is like this big. But I don't think this is about brain power. I think it's about sentience, and they're incredibly sentient and they're incredibly sensitive. And so what I believe, and this is my opinion, but I believe that when we're showing up different from who we are or how we naturally want to show up, it creates an energetic pressure inside of us. And horses are really sensitive to that pressure. And it's interesting, and I'll give you an example to give you a little more context. People will say a lot of times, well, horses can tell if you're afraid. So if you're around a horse, you can't show it that you're afraid, because if you're afraid, you're going to make the horse afraid. That's actually not true. And I've experienced this probably hundreds of times at this point. What happens is, if you are afraid, and you go next to the horse and you try to pretend like you're not afraid, the horse already knows you're afraid. But you trying to make yourself something you're not creates a pressure that makes the horse anxious. If you are afraid, and I just had this with a client the other day, she said, I'm really intimidated by horses. I've not been around them. They're very big. And I've heard that I need to act like I'm not afraid. And I said, that's absolutely not true. Just be afraid and tell that horse you're afraid. Let the horse know that you're afraid. And, she did. And the horses were totally fine with her and they came right up to her. Another good example, because people also think that if you're loud or if you have big movement or if you're elevated in any emotion that you're going to scare the horses away. But it's really just the opposite of that. It's you not being how you actually feel in that moment. And my dad passed away unexpectedly in 2013, and we ran a farm together and a business together, and we lived, in the house together. And obviously, I was wrecked when this happened, and the first place I wanted to go and be was with my horses. And I ran out into the middle of the field with the horses, and I was hysterical, and I was screaming, and I was sobbing, and I'm pretty sure I was rolling around on the ground. I mean, it was a spectacle that you would think would terrify the horses and make them run away. And they did not. They all came and stood around me in a circle and put their heads down to me, and they were just completely connected. So I feel like that was really my ultimate test on the theory that horses are not looking for you to show up in a way that's safe. They're just looking for you to be honest. And so a lot of times when we are in the military, there's feelings that we really can't access because it's not safe, right? If you're vulnerable in the military, that means people could die, including yourself. And so we really get programmed to wear this mask in the military, which we need to in order to accomplish our job. Like, we wouldn't be able to do what we do if we didn't do that. And when we're all on the same page and we're functioning that way, we have this common understanding of the way that we are, and it's accepted in the community. But when you're not in that community anymore, the general public doesn't live like that, especially today as it's getting more appropriate to express feelings and emotions. And so it can be really a shock to the system because your brain is still telling you it's not safe to feel how you feel. And until you learn how to override that, which is something we also do here, you're going to be trapped where every time you may really want to be authentic and you may get yourself all, set up like, I'm going to be authentic. And you could get right to the point where you're supposed to be authentic or vulnerable, and your body will not let you do it because your body believes it's not safe. And so what the horses do is they create this environment for you to access that vulnerability and be safe. And I think our brains kind of go like, wow, if I can be authentic and have this 1,200-pound animal love me for it, I wonder who else would love me for my authentic self. And so we just start getting into that experiential questioning of, the horses are going to show up how you show up. They're going to help expand your emotional intelligence, because they're reading the life inside of you, but it's all done in a way that's safe. And I think with people, and this will go a little bit into, how you can help veterans specifically. I think that, the buzzword today is kind of trauma informed. And I think being trauma informed is really important, and it's really a great thing, but it's also a spectrum. And I think with good intentions, a lot of times people will take that too far. And then it's almost like a walking on eggshells around people's trauma. And just like with the horses, we can feel that. And that creates a pressure. And I've had a lot of veterans tell me they don't like going to non-veteran programs because everybody's so being so cautious of them. Like, they don't want to say the wrong thing. They don't want to do the wrong thing. And, I had one guy say, it just makes me feel like a freak, like a science experiment. I want to know, as somebody who's struggling, I don't care who you are. I want to know that you've struggled too. I want you to share with me a time that you've struggled. So it's let me know that it's okay and that you understand where I'm coming from. And I'm sure it's like this with everybody. Obviously, I'm in the veteran space, so that's what I can speak to the most. But I think in order to be vulnerable, we have to feel connected. And if I don't know that you've experienced something similar, or a struggle at least, how can I know that you understand me? But the moment I know that you've struggled too, I immediately start to feel safe. And I feel like the judgment factor goes down, right? And I think also I've co-facilitated with a lot of people, and I'm a lifelong learner, and I'm always trying to grow and learn. And I've facilitated with some mental health professionals that are just phenomenal at what they do. And then I watch how the participants respond. And then I've facilitated with some mental health professionals where I've just watched every person shut down, and I'm always looking for feedback. So I'm always asking, like, what about this felt good? Like, what about this didn't feel good? And so that's where I get that information that I'm speaking to now. Those are some of the pieces of feedback that I've received. But I think taking this back to the horses and what they can do, and I've heard so many veterans say this, is that the horses can't talk. They cannot give you suggestions. They cannot give you opinions. They really can't even judge you. And I think removing judgment is the quickest gateway to helping someone access their vulnerability. But then, realistically, we have to know that all humans will judge. We can't help it. It's programmed into us. It's obviously what we do after we have the judgment that makes all the difference. But the horses aren't capable. Horses can only make two judgments. Are you safe or are you unsafe? And if you're unsafe in that moment, which means you're not being authentic, the horse will go away and will not acknowledge you. And if you are safe, then the horse will be with you and be connected to you. And it's like clockwork. It's never faltered. It's just an instant feedback loop that horses give off all of the time. It's not something we train into them. It's something that they innately possess, that we're really fortunate enough to now understand and be able to channel in a way that can help us all return to our authenticity. The horses that we have here are all rescues. A lot of them have come from not great homes. We have a couple that are here because they were too violent to be in the places that they were at before. And I think there are a lot of different modalities and models out there. Our model is unique. I actually personally developed it. And it's a little bit, we'll say it's a little bit unconventional, but I had a very prophetic experience with a horse where I felt like it was trying to show me and communicate some things to me. And I really sat with that experience. And from that, I ended up looking up some stuff in some meridian charts. And the horse was doing different things with its body, and it kept repeating these movements over and over again. And they were not normal horse movements. And so when I looked up these meridian charts, I found that each meridian has associated emotions with it. And I found that the client that I was working with was verbalizing a lot of these emotions. And when I went and looked up these charts, I found that it was verbatim what the client was saying was the exact emotions in these meridians where the horse kept touching itself on its body. I created a set of charts that I call the equine communication charts. And basically what I've discovered is that the horses can read specific areas where the human is blocked energetically. And so through these charts, the horses will either touch the person on different parts of their body, or the horses will touch themselves or do different movements with their body. And after watching these movements over and over, I've annotated them on these charts, and I've been using them for 4 years here at the farm, and there's never been one session where the charts were not dead on. And we've been testing, and I've used the same horse with different people, one after the other, because when I had the experience, I was like, I think I'm going crazy. And then my second thought was, I have to disprove this. And I've been trying to disprove it for 4 years. And there hasn't been a session yet that I've done with people that hasn't been spot on. But what I also noticed before I came into this modality, I was using another modality called Egala. And in that modality, the horses were actually used kind of as tools or like metaphors. And people would kind of project their life scenarios onto the horse. And I had a couple of horses that really were just getting burnt out on the work. They stopped wanting to participate. And, I never wanted the horses not to enjoy this work as well. But I feel like for a period of time, they were kind of feeling like emotional dumping grounds for people. They weren't really having a voice in the session. They were just kind of being projected on. And so I had one horse in particular. Her name is Tulip. She was my dad's horse. And she just got to the point where anytime you would go to get her for a session, she would walk away. So I discovered this modality. It was given to me, whatever. I started facilitating through these charts. And Tulip now comes to the gate to participate. Like, the horses have just become so engaged and so willing, because instead of a tool being used in the session, they're now a co-facilitator, and their voices are really heard. And I've actually gone and I've done this work at other facilities. And when I get there, a lot of times the horses are used to being, lesson horses, or, they're not used to being allowed to use their voice. But after a couple of days of using the charts on these other horses, they almost come alive in their spirit as well. So it's been amazing to see what this work does for people, but it's also empowering the horses and causing the horses to really love doing their job as well. Instead of just having to take everybody's emotions, they get to, be really active in the sessions as well. So it's been an amazing experience to see how the whole program has come together and come to life. They've learned how to transform their limiting beliefs. We ask them, now, who are you going to be? And what are you going to do with your life? And what are the things that you'd like to have? And when you can be and do and have those things, how will you contribute back to the world? It is very transformational. A lot of times people ask, like, can anyone really change that much in just 5 days? And I say, people can change that much in one moment with one realization. And so I think that's what it is. It's a lot of expanding our awareness. And awareness, once expanded, can never return to its original form. And so we're really just teaching people to have a broader perspective and a higher level of thinking, because we want to help people associate to reality. And reality is that life is hard. Life is challenging. There's never going to be a time where your life isn't challenging, because challenge is necessary to growth, and it's a part of life. So a lot of times people try to work on their environment instead of themselves. And we don't have control over a lot of things in our environment, but we do have control always over our perspective. And so it really just helps people, the goal isn't to make things in your life less chaotic. It's to make ourselves more resilient. And when we make ourselves more resilient and we value and appreciate ourselves at a higher level, then our tolerance for the things that we've been allowing really goes down. And that's how we change our environment. But it has to start with us. and we have to know who we are. And then what people do after they come through is they get to go home and they get to rebuild their life based on who they actually are, not who they've been trying to be. And, right now we're seeing like a 91% reduction in suicidal ideation. We're seeing a 76% reduction in substance coping. And a lot of that I would attribute to a lot of times when we have substance use challenges, it's because we're trying to escape our life. And so when we help people create a life that they no longer want to escape, it becomes a natural byproduct that their addictions really calm down and stop ruling their lives. So we've seen a huge reduction in substance coping, and also about a 90% reduction in self-isolation. Because when we learn who we are, we talk about finding our tribe, right? And so the people that you're isolating from, they just may not be in your tribe. But when you find people that are in your tribe, you don't want to be away from them anymore. So the success that we're seeing from the program is really just blown any expectations that I've had out of the water. I'm constantly in awe of the results that we're getting, but I can definitely attribute it to the core principles of finding your authentic self, appreciating your authentic self, and building a life that's congruent with your authentic self. And when people can do those three things, their mental health struggles dramatically decrease.
How long have you been doing this work with H.O.O.V.E.S?
So I founded H.O.O.V.E.S in 2009, and we officially became a nonprofit in 2011. But it was 2017 where we started doing the multi-day programs.
Oh, great. Awesome. So how many people have come through the program about?
We just ended our season and we hit 500 veterans.
Wow. Wow. So I'm assuming they come from all over then, not just kind of regionally and locally.
They do. We started serving a lot of veterans, well, just locally. And as the word spread, we started bringing people in further and further away. We have people coming in from California, Texas, Florida. We even had some from Washington State this year and Alaska. So the word is getting out. And we've actually helped 2 veterans from Canada as well.
Is there a follow through with this? Like after they complete the 5 days, do they come back? Can they see the horses again? Is there like a follow up, like maybe a virtual kind of thing or anything like that?
So if our veterans are local, we encourage them to always come back as volunteers. We do different programming. We're actually looking at launching some more community-based events for next year. And then we also have, in addition to the 5-day intensive, we have a 1-year online curriculum. So they get follow-up exercises to do to help them integrate the work that they learned while they were here. We also provide monthly support through energy work, and then we do monthly Zoom calls for them to continue to do the exercises. We always try, if they're from out of state and they want to stay connected with horses, we try to find a program close by that maybe does weekly stuff. So Drake came from Washington. He had 0 horse experience. He came out to the farm. He had a massive transformation while he was here, and then he went back home to Washington State and found a local program for veterans, and they do weekly horsemanship lessons. So now he's got a cowboy hat now and cowboy boots and a Carhartt, and he's learning more about horsemanship, and he gets to participate weekly. But one of the things we like to do while the veterans are here is expose them to a lot of different things, the breath work, the yoga, things like that. It's kind of a smorgasbord because different things work for different people. And then we encourage them to go home if they live out of town and find yoga studios or breathwork studios or other horse places that they can still get that contact with horses. But all of the alumni are always invited to or encouraged to come back as mentor alumni. So in every intensive that we do, 2 of them are always alumni.
Oh, wow.
Encourages them to stay in the work. And so we open up an application every year, and if they're doing the work, they've stayed dedicated. We even have some veterans who are out of state who have driven back or flown back just to volunteer.
Wow.
Help the next group come through. So we tell people it's a family. We're here forever. And we're always here when you need us. And you're always welcomed and encouraged to come back. We love seeing the growth. And it helps the new participants as well to see that it's not just the staff saying this works. They get to hear real life story of someone else that it had worked for, and a lot of the ones that leave the most changed and go on to create the most change in their life are the ones that were the most resistant coming or the most shut down when they got here. So I always know if somebody's particularly shut down or skeptical, they're usually going to be the biggest believers by the end. So there is no cost to attend the program for veterans. And then we do also once a year, we do the same exact program for spouses or caregivers or adult children of veterans, because they're a really underserved population. And so the program is privately funded. We're not clinical, so we don't bill insurance, but through private donations, we raise enough money every year to cover the tuition for all of the veterans to come.
I love that. Well, as I was saying before we started this interview, my goal in doing these is not only to get the insights out there, but how can we propel great work forward? So what you just said to me says this could be a way that those listening could help propel the great work you're doing forward. If they wanted to give a donation, to help kind of cover the expenses. So I can put that in the description of this video. I'm assuming you have some type of link or something they could do if they wanted to donate.
Yes, absolutely. That would be great. And so for our 2025 campaign, what we're doing is we're calling it Journey with Hooves. And so whether you are a veteran who's struggling and looking for support, or whether you're somebody looking to volunteer and have an experience that way, or whether you're looking for a donation relationship or to make a financial contribution, we have a journey for you. And so when people go to our website, they're invited to subscribe to our journey. And what you're going to get when you subscribe is it's a series of email videos. You're going to get an email from me welcoming you to the journey. And then every 3 days, you'll get a video, and there'll be of a veteran that's attended, a parent of a youth that's attended our youth program. You'll get a special video meeting one of our rescued horses. And then we have videos from our volunteers and our donors just sharing what they love about the organization and why they're so passionate. And so if you really want to go on that journey and get a feel for what this organization is about, signing up for our email journey is a great way. We don't spam people, but we educate and share opportunities if you want to be involved. And it just does a really great job of educating people. And it's a great way to join us on our mission.
And I love the part when you said the power of sharing our story, because that's something I've always kind of encouraged people as well. Working in prevention, I don't work in treatment, but I'm around people in recovery. And, a lot of times there's that shame attached. And I always encourage them to share your story because you've experienced things that a lot of us have not experienced. And the more we can better understand how we're more alike than we are different, the more it empowers us. So even though I haven't personally struggled with an addiction, like you said, we all have things we've struggled with. And if I can better understand you, then I can better support you and your voice can be heard. And then you feel like you're giving back from those experiences as well to help somebody else. So I love that.
Yeah, it's full circle. I recently also started a podcast. It's called The Pegasus Perspective. And I'm interviewing the veterans that have come through the program. And to your point of story, when the veterans come here, a lot of times we call it, you're running your story, right? So if you haven't processed your story, you run your story, and it's from the victim mindset a lot of times, right? And that we get stuck in those stories. And so I always tell people, your story is important. It's part of who you are. It's how you got here. But your story is also killing you if you haven't transformed it, right? And so through the 5 days, we learn how to take our story and stop running it so that we can actually share it, right? And when we share our story, we share it from that place of empowerment, that place of hope, that place of inspiration. And so the podcast is all the veterans who have come through that want to share. They share about their dark time and they take us to their darkest moment, because people need to hear that so they know that they're not alone. They know that they're not. I think when we're in that space of struggling, it's easy to feel like nobody understands. It's easy to feel like you're the only one struggling with this. And so a lot of times when you hear someone else's story of how they struggled, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. But then the second part of the podcast is take me to the moment with the horse. What happened? What was the wisdom that the horse gave you that changed your life? And so our listeners are also getting this wisdom secondhand. So even if they don't have the opportunity to be with a horse and have that experience, hearing the story of how that veteran interacted with that horse and what the horse said to them can also be inspirational and healing. And then the final part is, how did you actually take that wisdom and implement it in your life to create change? Because, to know and not do is to not know. So what are the tangible action steps that I can start implementing today in my life to create change, be more authentic? They're so transformative, and the stories are just profound, from domestic abuse to suicide to addiction. I mean, the stories are just wow.
I see too that you had a movie. Was there?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to talk about that?
That was my last thing. Yes. In 2022, we decided to film one of our intensives so that we could really share the power of the program and the power of horses and uplift the industry and bring awareness to veterans. And so our documentary is going to launch on Veterans Day. The documentary will also be available for viewing via our website, H.O.O.V.E.S.
What I was going through is PTSD. It was just something I dealt with, and now I just live with it.
In 2010, I found myself hospitalized after a suicide attempt that was unsuccessful.
Since 06, I've been through every program, rehab, inpatient, outpatient, class, or program that the VA can offer, not to mention numerous private rehabs. As of most recent, I did a 15-month stint in prison.
We don't want to admit we have problems. We just want to be normal.
I definitely came with no or low expectations because I have set myself up in the past. Like, this is going to be some kind of something. It's going to change me or do this or do that.
I feel like I'm in a cage, and there's no key, there's no door. I'm just in a cage, and no one can get me out, and I can't get myself out.
But you've seen how it really was. Heroism, danger, fear, all rolled into one. Words don't describe it.
Nobody was coming to save me. If I was going to heal, I had to save myself.
The path to freedom is within us, and we just have to find it. And this place helps you find it.